Have you ever wanted to know how to beat an ENTP in an argument? While everyone sees ENTPs as the master debater, there's specific weaknesses they have that not everyone knows. In this video, I'll break those things down so you have the upper hand. Let's get into it. All right, so let's get into it. When it comes to ENTPs, there's definitely specific things that make them very good arguers, but there's also weak spots that they have that people don't always realize because they're very good. And we'll get into their strong spots, weak spots, and adaptations you can make if you find yourself in an argument with an ENTP or just in general, really someone who's good at arguing. But specifically, for an ENTP, certain things that might get under their skin a little bit more. So first, we'll maybe do just kind of a basic overview of an ENTP's functions, the basic way their brain works, right? So getting into an ENTP, we have their NE hero. Their hero functions very good at predicting things, at looking ahead, at being able to presume, to make predictions, understand where things are going, where things are headed, what other people might do, what other people will do, trying to understand the what ifs, the potential future outside of themselves with extroverted intuition. That is their primary strength. Secondarily, they supplement that with their introverted thinking, which is their internal deductive machine, able to logically process things very quickly and analyze all of the different situations and different potentials they come up with in their head to look for what is true and why logically. So that's something they're very good at, and they're able to use this, speak this very confidently, and that parent functions very, very skeptical, pessimistic, very, very wary. So it's very good at being able to weigh out potential truths, potential lies, and try and understand this on a very high level when they are mature. They're extroverted feeling child, very optimistic about ethics, about what other people feel, what's good for others, justice, fairness in the universe, and looking for that equality with everyone's worth, everyone's value and life, basically. Introverted intuition about what they need to do, their obligations, their effort, their actions, being analytical about their past, their experiences, the things they've gone through. A bit of an insecurity about having a bad experience, about having a negative memory be implemented. So that's something that they're insecure about, but when aspirational, more confident about their ability to survive bad experiences, being very enduring and being able to stick through things no matter what. And we're going to get into how these things come into play when it comes to arguing with them and why they are such good arguers. Their introverted intuition nemesis, looking at the things they want, not just about what other people are going to do, but what they're going to do. And this can make them good strategists when they take the time to prepare. It's not their primary function, but it's a secondary type of function that they can still use in a very, very good way. When they take the time to prepare, when the other person is maybe not doing it, they can definitely fill that void. Extroverted thinking critic, one of the things that make them notorious arguers, being critical of what other people know, critical of what other people think is true, critical of other people's ideas, other people's presumptions. Other people's presumptions maybe more anti-nemesis, but anyways. So, and then we have their introverted feeling trickster, how they feel about things. Very, very low. They don't care too much about their own feelings, their own biases, their own, preferences. They're not going to get emotionally involved necessarily in an argument, but we'll get into how they do get involved. But they might not get emotionally invested. They're not going to be too bothered if they're insulted or if somebody tries to get at their value, their worth, because they just don't care. They just care about what is true, and they like to argue that fact with that critical eye on other people. Their demon extroverted sensing is another reason they're big arguers. They don't care about other people's comfort. They don't care about what is normal. They're just going to do what they're going to say what they're going to say. They're going to say the truth because that's their responsibility. That's their, general responsibility as an adult with parent thinking functions. And extroverted sensing demon doesn't care if other people are uncomfortable, doesn't care if other people are going to have a bad experience being told something, if other people are going to, react badly. So they don't care about your reactions, and because they don't care about your experience or your reactions to things, they don't mind saying things that will make you upset. And they're optimistic enough with their FE, they assume it doesn't matter emotionally. They don't think that it's going to be bad for you or it's going to hurt your feelings, because the truth is what really makes you feel good in the end. And that's an ENTP's mind in a few seconds. Of course, these are the complementary functions. We'll get into that a little bit later, but let's dive into it. What are the strong spots for an ENTP when it comes to arguing? They have good predictive abilities with extroverted intuition. They're very good at seeing where things are going, what people might say, what people would say. Oh, that person believes this. Well, they would think this. They would do this. They're going to probably argue this. And they can look ahead 5, 10, 15 steps ahead and try and understand where a person is going, with their argumentation, with their beliefs, and try and take that extra step of preparation when it comes to their own deductions and arguments. So that's something they're very strong at. They have very good logic that is pre-processed. They think things through. They spend a lot of time thinking, and they think skeptically. They're not just thinking for random things or for no reason, although everyone's different. Their logic is going to be very cutting and true. It's going to think about both sides of the argument. It's going to verify a little extra. It's going to take that extra little thought, that extra little step to see things objectively. Because of their lack of FI, they don't let their feelings get involved. They don't let their biases. They don't let their, feelings of grandiosity or self-worth necessarily get involved when it comes to their arguments. So they're going to belittle their emotions, their bias, and up the objectivity of their arguments, which is some, strength for them. They also have kind of an ethical optimism. They're optimistic about other people's feelings. They're not too worried about pissing people off. They're not too worried about upsetting people. They're pretty optimistic that what they're doing is justified. So that's a strength in some ways. We'll get into how it can be a weakness as well. But they're very optimistic with their convictions, with the fact that what they're doing is just, the fact that what they're doing is justified. So trying to have that ethical reason behind why they're doing what they're doing, and that kind of emboldens their argumentation because they feel like they have a ethical justification to do it. A very strong memory bank, being able to recall things from the past, being able to remember things, have gone through experiences, remembered things they've read. That ability to recall is another strong spot for an ENTP in an argument, is that they can recall things, recall experiences, recall things that you did, predict what you're going to do next, recall what you did, cut you with logic, feel morally justified, ethically justified. That's some of the strong spots. They also have a good strategy if they are able to pre-plan. Their anti-nemesis, not their top function, but they often will still formulate some level of strategy when it comes to what they're going to do, what they're going to say, what they're going to argue. It's still connected to that hero function, which is always going. They're critical as well of others' argumentation. They're not going to assume what you're saying is true. They're going to break it down. They're going to be critical. They're going to assume you're wrong, that you have misbeliefs, that you're ignorant, that you don't know what you're talking about, that you don't know what you're saying, that you're illogical. They're going to come from a very pessimistic point of view, which is why they can be pretty argumentative, because they assume, I've already pre-thought this person probably hasn't thought about it as well as me. They won't let their feelings get in the way. They won't let their emotions get in the way of a good argument, right? So like we talked about with FI Trickster, they're not going to let their feelings get in the way. And they don't care about your comfort, as I said with SE Demon. They just don't care if you're going to be uncomfortable talking about that topic. They don't care if you react really negatively. They don't care if you're getting upset or getting pissed off or you're not going to have a good experience, a good time. They don't care, because that's not as important as these top functions about what's going to happen: truth, logic, justice. And then we get into the weak spots, things that, they're very good arguers. They're extroverted. They have a lot of energy when it comes to arguing. They're not too worried about making people mad. They like to speak the truth. They like to argue. They like to, criticize other people. They assume others are wrong. They're not too worried about being rejected because of an argument. There's all these little things that make ENTPs good arguers. Or what are their potential weak spots? They're any hero, right? Always making predictions, assuming where things are going. They will make a lot of assumptions, a lot of presumptions. They will assume your next move. They will presume based on the past what you would think, what you would do. And these assumptions can sometimes be wrong because they're trying to make so many predictions that sometimes they're just not going to know which one to choose. They're not always going to assume properly necessarily. And we'll talk about the reaction to that in a second. Maybe I'll get into that per point. They'll make assumptions, presumptions. They'll assume things about you in an adaptation. Surprise them with your argumentation. Call out when they're being presumptuous, when they're making assumptions, when they're assuming what you believe, when they use a straw man argument, when they assume that you believe things, when they make up things you might believe or you could believe or you would believe or you will believe. Slippery slope arguments as well. Oh, this will happen, then this will happen, then this will happen. Well, that in and of itself might be irrelevant to the argument because it is a hypothetical. Using too many hypotheticals, relying on those things is a good thing to call out an ENTP for. Potentially using straw man arguments where they create a version of you in their head, which might not be true, surprise them, bring up ways that you go against the things they think you're going to do and the things they think you are. Relying on that predictive ability a little bit too much, it might get them in trouble. Another potential weak spot, they will only know what they've already processed, right? So they've thought a lot of things true. Maybe they've done some reading, they've thought about it. But ENTPs don't have TE in a very optimistic slot. They're not always going to be finding every source, every piece of information, every piece of data. So that's a thing you can take advantage of. Bring out new data that came out, new sources, new information, new articles that just dropped, new books, new things they haven't heard of. They might not have processed it. They might be very good at processing things when they know it and when they've heard it, but there might be things they haven't heard, angles they haven't heard. Oh, it just got exposed. This person did this, or this is true about this. Bringing up different sources, new information is going to be a potential weak spot for an ENTP because they're not always researching. They're not always looking things up. Their TE is lower. They're more in their own head. And so while they're very, very accurate in their own head, they might be blind to things outside of them. It's a potential weak spot. Another thing is that they can forget sometimes ethical nuance. They're very optimistic that they're justified. They're very optimistic about the people they're trying to help. FE Child is very optimistic about helping victims, helping people who are in need. It has that bleeding heart syndrome. They may sometimes forget about ethical nuance. Well, okay, what about this? What about this ethical thing, right? So call out things they may not have thought about. They may be overconfident with their justifications. Say, actually, bringing up news sources. Did you know that this is true? And so actually it's more ethical than you think. Or actually this is true, so it's less ethical than you think. Bringing up news sources that conflict with their perceived notions of what is fair, what is just. They may think certain things are fair, not necessarily fair. Overly optimistic when it comes to their ethical presumptions. They also have that very strong memory, right? A very good memory bank. They have those experiences that they have a lot of ties to. While they don't necessarily get emotionally involved in arguments through FI, they are going to get involved through SI. So, their experiences are going to make them a little bit more biased. They're going to remember things with their side of the story without necessarily looking at the other person's side of the story, which is a bit more of an SE thing. They might be biased. They might be relying on anecdotal evidence, experiences they've had that are only their experience, not necessarily relevant to 8 billion people's experiences, right? So understand where their experience is making them biased. Don't be afraid to trigger their experience as well. ENTPs don't care about your comfort. You might not have to care about their comfort as well. Get in their face. Be loud. Be objective, of course, and stay calm. But don't be afraid to make them a little uncomfortable, to present new things in the moment, to be very cutting in the moment. They like time to prepare. ENTPs like time to predict, see things where things are going. They're not always going to be super loud and confrontational in the moment. That's a bit more of an ENTJ thing. They're going to want to be a little bit more in the background, being analytical, dropping facts. But if you're getting in their face, you're bringing up new arguments they haven't thought about, right? You're bringing up new sources, things they haven't read. Oh no, I haven't pre-processed this. I haven't experienced this before. How do I react in the moment? They're going to get confused. They're an NP type. They're going to get confused in the moment. They're not going to know how to react, and it's going to overwhelm their ability to process the new information, and you're going to have them in the palm of your hands. Letting their bias show, right? Their bias might show the things they've experienced. Things will trigger them, right? So that SI is all about being triggered. It's all about having a bad experience, getting a bad reaction. It's about yourself and your own reactions. Stay calm, stay cool, stay, Joe cool. Don't have any reactions. Just stay analytical. They're going to react. They're going to have these big explosions. They're going to get angry. All of a sudden, they're the one that's getting emotional. ENTPs, like I said, need to be prepared. It helps for them to have pre-thought things. It helps for them to predict where things are going. It helps for them to have their own ethical justifications and to have their own experiences in something. Don't be afraid to switch topics up. Bring up new information, right? Like I said, don't be afraid to kind of bring things up in the moment. Confront them about things in the moment. Don't give them time to think about it, prepare, and have this whole plan and strategy ready. Bring up a new thing right in the moment. Don't be afraid to call them out right to their face. Mix it up. Don't get stuck in their line of logic and reasoning, which they've already pre-thought. Switch topics, bring up a different angle, come at it from a different side, and in the moment, it's going to be more difficult for them to process that if they didn't see it coming. They're TE critic, right? Like I said, very critical of others' argumentation. It's something that makes them optimistic about arguing with people. they're so critical, they might not always adapt or listen. They might not always hear your side of the argument. They're just waiting to say their pre-processed side of the argument. So criticize the fact that they're not responding to what you say, that they're not responding to your arguments. You can also criticize their lack of sources and surrounding information. Like I said, they're not always finding new sources. They're busy thinking about what they already know. Criticize that they're not open-minded, that they're not going out of their way to learn new things, that they haven't found this different source. So like I said before, bringing up that potential weak point. They're FI trickster, very low moral feelings. They don't necessarily have preferences. They don't necessarily even have morals related to what they think. They just look at the objective. This is what's true. I don't know how I feel about it, but that's what's true. Because of that, you can express your moral implications. You can say what you feel about it. You can bring up your personal principles, your personal feelings, why you think something is good. Don't focus as much on what is true. Take what is true and what they're saying and bring up why the reaction is wrong, why their conclusion, their moral conclusion to their logical presumption is wrong. They might say this is true, but then their outcome, their, final conclusion might be based in immorality. Bring up specific moral arguments to debate and combat their logical arguments, because that's something they're going to under focus on. ENTPs don't care about your comfort, but they care a lot about your comfort, or about their own comfort, with SI being in that kind of insecure slot. Well, don't be afraid to make them uncomfortable. If they're making you uncomfortable, make them uncomfortable. Trigger their experience. And this is a little more related maybe to SI than SE, but don't be afraid to make them uncomfortable. And with regards to SE, I'll make a different point. SE has a difficult time sometimes reacting in the moment. So like I said, don't be afraid to bring things up in the moment. Don't be afraid to debate them in the moment. Don't be afraid to, lock in, just stay in the moment and bring up different things, bring up different arguments. Don't let them leave. Don't let them run away. Don't let them change the topic. Stay on track, stay focused, stay locked in. And those are the ways to win an argument against an ENTP. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any thoughts on this topic, or if you want me to do a series on all of the different personality types. Please like and subscribe, as it helps the channel, and I hope you all have a great day.